Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us this afternoon for Nonprofit HR's webinar on building a talent-focused workplace culture. My name is Alicia Shashinsky. I'm the co-leader of Nonprofit HR's Knowledge Practice, and I will be your moderator for today. We have a lot of great content to cover, so let's get started. Here are a few housekeeping items before we begin. There is no dial-in for today's session. The webinar will be streamed through your computer. For the best audio quality, make sure your computer speakers are turned on and that your volume is up so that you can hear the presenter. Some networks may cause slides to advance more slowly than others, so logging off your VPN is recommended. If your slides are behind, pushing F5 on your keyboard will refresh the page. Webinars are bandwidth intensive, so closing any unnecessary browser tabs will help conserve your bandwidth. At the bottom of your screen are multiple application widgets you may use. All of the widgets are resizable and movable, so feel free to move them around to maximize your screen space. The green widget with the document contains resources such as the slides from today's session and links to other helpful resources. You can expand your slide area or maximize it to full screen by clicking on the box in the upper right corner. If you have any questions during the webcast, you may submit them through the purple Q&A widget at the bottom of your console. If you would like to contact Nonprofit HR for more information, click on the blue widget with the envelope. We will try to answer questions during the webcast, but if we don't get to them at the end of the webcast, we will follow up with an email. You can find additional answers to some common technical issues located in the Help widget, which is the yellow question mark at the bottom of your screen. A copy of today's slides will be emailed to you with a follow-up message that will also include your HRCI and SHRM activity ID for recertification credits. That will come within the next couple of days. At the end of the session, a feedback survey will pop up. We appreciate you providing your thoughts on today's session and any other topics you'd like to hear in future webinars. You can also access that on the second clipboard widget on your screen. Today's webinar is sponsored by Cornerstone On Demand, so I'm going to turn this over to Catherine West, Marketing Strategist from Cornerstone, to share information and to introduce our speaker. Catherine?
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. As Alicia mentioned, my name is Catherine West, Marketing Strategist for Cornerstone On Demand. And I wanted to tell you just a little bit about what Cornerstone is doing. Cornerstone is pioneering solutions to help nonprofit organizations realize the potential of the modern workforce. As a global leader in cloud-based learning and human capital management software, Cornerstone is designed to enable a lifetime of learning and development that is fundamental to the growth of your nonprofit and its employees, volunteers, and members. From recruitment, onboarding, training and collaboration, to performance management, compensation, succession planning, people administration, and analytics, Cornerstone is there at every phase of the employee life cycle. The company's solutions are used by more than 3,350 clients worldwide, spanning 37 million users across 192 countries and in 43 languages. But now it's my pleasure to introduce today's speaker, Lisa Brown Alexander, President and CEO of Nonprofit HR. Under her direction, Nonprofit HR has served some of the most prominent nonprofits and associations in the country. With more than 2 decades of human resource management experience with nonprofits and for-profit organizations, Lisa and her firm have proven that better HR can play an integral role in nonprofit success. Nonprofits have benefited from her wealth of knowledge and experience to make their people-driven initiatives successful. She believes if an organization can strengthen its HR capacity, it can better serve the community and those in need. Lisa brings these beliefs to every engagement and inspires nonprofit leaders to strengthen their most important asset, their people. Lisa provides strategic level guidance to nonprofit HR clients and works closely with C-suite leaders and nonprofit boards of directors on client engagements. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Lisa.
Thanks so much, Catherine. Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this afternoon's webinar on building a talent-focused workplace culture. This is an area I'm particularly passionate about, and so I look forward to engaging with you. Please take full advantage of our chat feature today, our Q&A box on your screen. to ask your questions as they come to you. You certainly don't need to wait until the end. So let's get started. Just a little bit about nonprofit HR before we move things along. As was mentioned, we are a human resources consulting firm based in Washington, D.C., and we work across the country with social sector organizations of all types of missions and sizes. We work with organizations to help them strengthen their talent management capacity, and our services include human resources consulting, outsourcing, talent acquisition, executive search, and then knowledge, such as webinars like today. If you need to reach out to us, our contact information will be available at the end of the presentation. All right, let's jump in. So today we are going to tackle three major areas. One is the importance of culture to organizations. We spend a lot of time working with organizations on understanding their culture, and I'd like to talk with you today a little bit about why culture matters to mission. We're also going to spend some time talking about nonprofit talent management needs and why it's important for your organization to have a talent management plan. And then finally, we're going to provide 5 very practical, easily implementable strategies for building a talent-focused workplace culture. So why does culture matter to mission? It may seem like an unusual question given today's world that we're in, but it's really important to set the atmosphere for your organization through the culture that you create. And so ultimately, culture matters to mission because it's a driver for organizational success. It really is. When we think about an organization's mission, yes, we all support wonderful missions, important missions that drive the communities that we're in. But why does it matter? Why does the culture matter to your organization? It matters because an unhealthy culture can drive the success of your organization, can determine whether or not you achieve your mission. Some other reasons why culture matters to mission is because culture helps to attract talent. In today's world, individual job seekers rely on what they can find out about your organization, both through social media, through friends, through people in the community, about your organization. And if your organization's culture is toxic or unhealthy, the word about that will eventually get out. It will definitely get out. And so you want to be sure that you've got a healthy workplace culture as a way of driving talent into your organization. I'm going to pause for just a moment. It would seem that the screen that I'm not on is not the one that you're on. So if I'm going to just pause to see if we can synchronize what we're doing here.
I think we are now on why culture matters to mission. So
okay, wonderful. Thank you so much, Alicia. Thank you. All right. So we talked about the importance of culture in helping you to attract talent to your organization. You certainly want to keep your employer brand and your organization's reputation intact in order to attract high-performing talent, right? So that's really important. The word will get out if you're not a healthy organization. Whether you want it to or not, the word will get out. Your employees may go online and share with their friends. They may get into chat forums. They may do other things, post online if they're really disgruntled. And that can be a significant deterrent to people who are considering joining your organization as an employee. We also know that effective organizational cultures help to drive employee engagement. Conversely, employee engagement helps to drive positive workplace culture. So they work hand in hand. What we've seen over the 18 years we've been in this space working with organizations on their human resources capacity building is that there is a direct correlation between organizational culture and employee engagement. Never in my 18 years of running this firm have I seen an organization with an unhealthy workplace culture have high levels of employee engagement. Conversely, when an organization has high levels of engagement within it, we typically see a healthy workplace culture. So engagement is important to mission. Of course, engagement and satisfaction, employee satisfaction, go hand in hand. And so it's important to your culture, if you're going to have an effective organizational culture, that you also monitor the employee satisfaction levels of your staff. But again, what we see is when an organization's culture is healthy and effective, the employee satisfaction levels follow those numbers. And then finally, ultimately what really matters with culture is that it has the potential to impact individual and organizational performance. Again, your ability to attract, the extent to which employees are engaged and satisfied, and the extent to which individuals feel like they can bring everything they have to the table is really important. They're all directly connected to culture. So, this is why culture matters to mission. It helps you attract new talent, it drives your employee engagement, it helps keep your employee satisfaction levels high, and it helps you to optimize and maximize individual and organizational performance. I'm going to pause for a moment. It looks like we might have a question. Alicia, do we have one?
Yes. Somebody asked if there was a difference between brand and culture.
That's a great question. So yes, there is a difference between brand and culture. Culture is how people move within your organization, how decisions are made, what's valued, what's rewarded, the environment. Your brand is how you speak to the public about who you are, right? So if you think about the messaging you might deliver to your donors, for example, how you speak about your work and your mission, what it is that you do, even the imagery that's on your website, all of those things speak to your brand. And every organization has an employer brand, whether intentionally stated or unintentionally stated. But there is definitely a difference between brand and culture. Culture is how people move within the organization, how they connect with each other, the kind of environment, the kind of values that are set and lived by in the organization. Brand is how you speak to the public about who you are as an employer in the context of today's presentation. I hope that answers that question.
And Lisa, moving. We had one more question before you move on.
Oh, okay.
Somebody asked, what recommendations do you have to measure employee satisfaction, and what actions would you take?
Well, I think the first thing you want to do is engage in a regular and systematic way of measuring engagement through an employee engagement survey or an employee satisfaction survey. You can do that using technology. You can do it using focus groups if your budget is constrained. But you definitely want to have a clear understanding about the extent to which employees are satisfied and engaged with the workplace. We're going to touch on that a little bit more later on today's session. So I asked this question about what do you know about your organization's culture? Because what I have found in the work that we do with multitudes of nonprofit organizations is that there's often a disconnect between what leaders and even sometimes HR people understand about their culture and what the staff say about the culture. And so the question I ask you is, what do you know about your organization's culture and how healthy it might be? You may have a perspective, but your staff may have a very different perspective. Leadership may have a different perspective than frontline staff. If you're a direct care organization, your in-office staff may have a very different perspective about the culture than the frontline staff. Your millennials may have a different perspective than baby boomers. Staff of color may have different perspectives on the culture than white staff or non-people of color. So it's really important to ask the question of your staff and your management their perspective. What do you believe about our culture? What does our culture say to you? But it's critical to know what is really happening with your culture and not what you suspect. So let's take a quick poll. I'd like for you, if you could, if you had to rate your organization's workplace culture on a scale from 1 to 10, with 10 being really healthy, really engaged, highly satisfied, and 1 being toxic, right? Where would you rate your organization? So go ahead and click on the button. Your organization will not be identified. This is an anonymous survey, but it will give us a chance to see what's happening culturally with the organizations that are participating in today's call. So I'm going to just take a moment. I'll pause and give you a chance to self-rate your organization's culture. All right. Let's see what we've got here. Where are we landing? Alicia? Having a little trouble with that refreshing our screen here. Maybe we can come back to that at the end of our session if we can't get our results. I'm so sorry to have led you down the wrong path.
But we do have a question in the meantime.
Okay.
Somebody asked, how often do you recommend measuring culture?
I would recommend on at least once a year, and if not once every other year, and then doing periodic check-ins with staff in between. You can do that through a pulse survey, a short, quick survey to measure certain elements of your culture that may be areas of concern, so that you can kind of measure where the needle is moving. But I would say once a year optimally, every other year if you have limited resources from a time and money perspective. I hope that answers your question. And I apologize that our poll isn't working today. I was actually very curious to see what our average score is. So we'll try to get that together and shoot that to you before the end of today's session. So let's move on. Let's talk about why your nonprofit needs a talent management plan, right? We're talking about building a talent-focused workplace culture. But how do we build a talent-focused workplace culture if we don't have talent management plans? So let's talk about that. I'm a strong believer, based on my years of experience working in the social sector, that talent is our unique value proposition as organizations. At the end of the day, your mission can be wonderful, the communities that you serve can be dynamic and exciting, but at the end of the day, that mission cannot come to life without people. Talent is the multiplier for organizations, multiplying in terms of its impact on the community. It's what gives your organization life. So talent powers mission. The more energy and attention you invest in it, the greater the yield, right? That's a great quote from Marcus Buckingham, famous author and business consultant. Again, the more energy and attention you invest in your talent, the greater the yield. And I would go further. When you look at your organization's budget, where is your greatest spend? Chances are it's around salaries and benefits. And so that's an asset that your organization needs to leverage fully. And that means you need to have a plan for how you do so, right? So let's talk a little bit more about that. Before we do, let's go back a second. This year, Nonprofit HR has spent a fair amount of time talking about the issue of sustainability. Sustainability is a term that we banter around among the nonprofit within the nonprofit sector on a fairly regular basis. But what does it mean to be sustainable as a nonprofit? I like this particular definition. We've added to it, so this is not exclusively our definition, but it's one that we've added to. So nonprofit sustainability occurs when a nonprofit attracts and effectively uses enough and the right kinds of people and money necessary to lead and achieve their long-term outcome goals. The key component of this definition is the right kinds of money and people. Many times when we talk about sustainability in the nonprofit sector, we're talking about finance and fundraising. But we don't have a conversation about the people who raise the money and the people who manage the finances and even the people who manage the programs of an organization. So having the right people in the right roles at the right time is a key component of sustainability. So, what is talent management? Talent management is a mission-critical process that ensures your organization has the right quantity and quality of people in place to meet current and future organizational priorities. So it's a process. It's a comprehensive process. Talent management is another term that we banter around, but sometimes we don't put a definition to it. It's more than just bringing people into your organization. It's also how you manage and handle them once they're there. So again, talent management, when we talk about it, it's having the right people in the right roles at the right time, and it's a comprehensive process. It allows you to think about what you need to do today, and it also facilitates how you work tomorrow as an organization. So the question is, does your organization have a talent management plan? If your answer is no, don't be dismayed. You're not alone. The vast majority of nonprofits that we work with don't have a talent management plan. They may have a strategic plan, but they don't have a corresponding talent management plan that defines how they'll bring people in, how they'll develop them, how they'll retain them, and how they'll transition them out. So that's what we're talking about when we talk about talent management. If you don't have one, that's okay. Work on it. It's something that you should definitely have as an organization. It's important to align your talent management plan to your strategic plan, but if you don't have one, you can always start today. All right, so there are multiple elements to a talent management plan. If you look on screen, you'll see here that there are 6 key elements to a talent management plan. The first is workforce planning. What do we mean by workforce planning? Here we're talking about thinking about your current and future needs from a talent perspective within your organization. Who do you need? When do you need them? What do you need them to do? And then looking across the landscape of your current workforce to identify where you have talent, where you need talent, and where there's a gap. And planning in an intentional way to close that gap, right? That's what we mean when we talk about workforce planning. Who's on the bench? Who can we develop to get on the bench? Who needs to get off the bench, right? So that's what we mean by workforce planning. Thinking ahead about the talent that you need for your organization. When we talk about talent acquisition, this refers to how we bring people into the organization. How do we go about looking for the talent that we need? What messaging do we use? How do we position ourselves as an employer of choice? What is our candidate experience like? What do people experience when they apply to a position with our organization? What messaging do we have on our website about the opportunities that exist within our organization? What's our internal promotions process? How do we create opportunities for people within our organization to move into new roles, right? So that's what we mean by talent acquisition. When we talk about performance management, this is really the component that we use to measure the effectiveness of the individuals who work in our organization. Cornerstone On Demand, for example, has a wonderful platform that organizations can use to measure individual performance. And so performance management is, we think about core competencies, we think about values measurement, we think about goal setting when we think about performance management. So it's an important component of the work. Increasingly, we find organizations are moving away from kind of an event-driven performance management process to a process that is much more fluid, more frequent feedback. We're seeing more and more organizations move to multi-rater and upward feedback, and really opening up the conversation between employee and supervisor about performance management and how it impacts the individual. When we talk about learning, this is an increasingly important component of a talent management plan. The demands and the needs of our changing workforce are really forcing us as organizations to spend more time thinking about learning and being intentional about the learning opportunities we create within our organization. Now, keep in mind, I didn't say promotions. I said learning, right? And so what we mean by that is what opportunities do we have to give folks to learn within the organization and outside of the organization while they work with us? What is that? What is the learning opportunity? How do we support the professional development needs of staff and prospective staff? An important component of talent management. When we talk about total rewards, we're really talking about benefits and compensation for the most part. So what reward systems do you have in place from a benefits and a compensation standpoint as an organization? What is your pay position? Do you want to lag? Do you want to lead? Do you want to match the market? All of these components make up your talent management plan, and more specifically, your total rewards plan. And then finally, career development, very closely connected to learning, but what opportunities do you make available to staff who want to grow with your organization? Where can people learn? How can they develop and continue to grow professionally? So when we talk about talent management, these are all of the components that are included in a talent management plan. I'm going to pause, see if we have any questions before moving on.
Yes, Lisa, we actually have several good questions. Let's see where we left off here. Okay. Somebody asked, how do you approach talking about culture if the feedback shows that the majority of people are having a positive experience, but an important subset are not, or the feelings about culture are polarized?
Well, if the culture is working well, you want to celebrate that as often as you possibly can, right? Continue to be intentional about communicating the elements of your culture that are working really well. And celebrate that in an active, positive, engaging way. Continue to engage with your high performers and tap them on a regular basis for ways that you can continue to expand upon the elements of your culture that are working. Conversely, if you have a toxic work environment or your culture is toxic and unhealthy, you need to understand that too. And the best way to understand that is to ask questions of your staff, to engage them in the conversation or in multiple conversations about what's not working, and to solicit their feedback and input on what can be done to improve the environment. Really, really important. So I hope I answered that question. I think it looks like we got our rating scale on the culture poll up and running, and it would appear that on average, the culture score, the culture index for those participating in the call today was about 5.5%, right? So on a scale from 1 to 10, most organizations rated themselves right in the middle. So if you're that organization, you're in good company, or at least in the company of many others. If you're an organization that rated yourself higher, consider yourself blessed. And those of you who rated yourself lower, then you probably have some work to do. Alicia, are there any other questions?
Yes, another one. How do you nurture organizational culture with volunteers who may spend 1 hour a week or per month with your organization? And how can you attract more volunteers through positive culture?
Good question. You know, volunteer management is a a horse of a different color, right? So we, as organizations, we have less kind of, I'm not going to say control, that's not the right word I'm looking for, but we have fewer opportunities to impact our volunteers than we do our paid staff. That said, having someone own the volunteer experience and engage with volunteers in a regular and meaningful way to ensure that they're experiencing, having positive experiences and healthy experiences is important too. It's the same principle that we would use with paid staff: regular conversation, intentional conversation, and then taking action with what you hear. I hope that answers that question.
And Lisa, we have a few more questions, but I think maybe you might cover some in your next section, so maybe we can hold off to the end.
All right, let's keep it moving. Ultimately, being a talent-focused organization means that you've got a workforce that's engaged, empowered, and learning. If you dilute your entire HR program down to 3 metrics, it's these 3, right? So being engaged, feeling empowered, and empowered to have control over their individual work, empowered to share their feelings from a workplace perspective, empowered to contribute to the health and welfare of the organization is what I mean by empowerment. And then learning. Learning is incredibly important and increasingly important, particularly if your staff skews younger. And so when you're a talent-focused organization, you're dialed into these 3 elements of your talent management program: ensuring that you have an engaged staff, ensuring that staff feel empowered to bring their best every day, and that they're constantly learning and that their learning needs are supported. So I'm a believer in being practical. And sometimes when we have conversations about talent and culture, it may feel a little squishy. But what I want to do now is spend some time talking about 5 very practical strategies that your organization can use for building a talent-focused culture. Let's begin. So, why does this matter? Why do we need talent-focused organizations? Our strong belief at Nonprofit HR is that talent-focused organizations really are the gold standard for nonprofit talent management. These are the organizations that are intentional, that are really the most successful. In these organizations, they allocate the appropriate resources for talent attraction, development, and retention, and they make a very close connection. They integrate the importance of having a strong talent-focused program and approach to their organizational success. So when we go back to the concept of having a strategic plan outlines kind of the future for the organization, where you're headed, how you're going to get there, and when you're going to get there. But how can you have success as an organization without a plan for the talent who are going to do the work? And so therefore, what we see in talent-focused organizations is that hiring, development, and retention effectiveness are prioritized by these organizations. Not only are they prioritized, but they're integrated with the organization's overall strategic plan. Now, there are 2 other kinds of nonprofits that we come across on a fairly regular basis. Those that are talent oblivious, meaning they don't have a clue when it comes to talent. They're not dialed in, they don't care, and they don't care that they don't care, right? They're just not focused on talent at all. And then there are the organizations that are talent aware. Those organizations are certainly not oblivious to the importance of talent to their organizational success, but talent is seen as a nice to have. And if things get tight, if funding is constrained, then talent management goes right along with it. So there's kind of a spectrum, a continuum of kind of talent engagement in organizations. the talent oblivious, the talent aware, which is a little bit better, and then the talent focused. Our goal is to see every nonprofit across the country be talent focused, where they prioritize the hiring, development, and retention of their staff, and the plan for talent is integrated with the strategic plan. Really important. So let's dive into the strategies. This may not seem to make sense to you. It may be overly simplistic. But in our experience, there are 5 things that nonprofits should do to build a talent-focused culture. The first is to invest. Invest in talent management, right? Make it a priority. The second is to listen to staff and management at all levels on a regular basis. The third is to regularly ask questions of your high performers and your non-performers about what is working and what is not working within the organization. Ask questions. The fourth, while seemingly obvious, be flexible. One of the things that employees of today really crave is flexibility and agility. So be flexible in your approach to talent. And 5, and most importantly, is be responsive and take action. So let's break each of those down. What does it mean to invest? I've said this more than once, but I will say it again. Making talent a priority in your organization is how you invest in building a talent-focused organization and a talent-focused culture. If talent is not a priority, you will not be a talent-focused organization. So you have to lift talent up to the kind of the 4-legged stool or the 3-legged stool that we see in almost every nonprofit across the country. Programs, fundraising, and finance kind of make up the 3-legged essential stool of the nonprofit sector, right, within nonprofit organizations. We like to see that be a 4-legged stool that puts talent right up there on the list of priorities. So programs, fundraising, finance, talent, making talent a priority. We also believe that if you're going to invest in being a talent-focused culture, you're going to allocate both the time and the resources for its management. That means someone within your organization is going to own the function, be accountable for it, and be responsible for it. And that it is given the time that it's needed if it's going to be successful, right? So there's conversation about talent at the leadership levels, at the staff levels, that there's appropriate amounts of money set aside to bring people in, to keep people, to develop them, that your talent investments are measured, meaning you know what is working and you know what's not, and you measure that on a regular basis, and that you reward for it. When there are good talent management practices, particularly by leadership, that gets recognized and rewarded. So we invest in what we reward in, we reward what we invest in, right? So first strategy for building a talent-focused culture is to invest in the talent-focused culture. The second strategy for talent management success and building a talent-focused culture is to listen. Listening is an underused resource and skill that we, particularly those of us in HR, really need to leverage and need to help our leadership leverage more. Listen and pay attention to what staff and management are saying about the organization. I can't tell you how many clients that we've worked with, nonprofit clients, that don't listen to what staff say. Now, does that mean you do everything that staff are telling you or you take every suggestion? No. But it means that you're paying attention and you're listening to recurring themes that come up over and over again about the culture in your organization. So listen, pay attention, and listen some more. What do you do with that listening? What do you do with the information that you get? Well, when you listen, actively listen, it will prompt you to ask questions. One of the things that we see frequently when we work with organizations around culture is that they make assumptions about the culture based on the voices of the loudest people on staff, right? And so ask the questions of the right people in your organization. Don't assume and don't only pay attention to the loudest. Ask questions of people whose voices you never hear. Now that may mean you need to have a kind of a pop-up one-on-one with them. Those people may not be apt to share their perspectives in a group setting, but chances are they've got some invaluable insights about what's going on in the culture and what may need to be addressed. Never assume, however, that you know what's going on. Ask questions, do so on a regular basis, and don't just pay attention to the squeaky wheel. For those organizations that are resource challenged, which I know many are, one of the easiest ways that you can engage staff in conversations about culture is through a series of focus groups. Look across the landscape of your employee demographic information and pull together focus groups based on shared demographics. For example, have conversations with individuals within your organization who are long-serving. You might pull together a focus group of people who've been with the organization for 10 years or more, or even 5 years, if 5 years is a long time in your organization. You'll also want to hear, conversely, from individuals who just got to your organization. Pull them together in a focus group and ask them about their perspectives on the culture as new hires, right? People maybe who've been with your organization for less than a year or less than 6 months. You might also get the perspective of millennials versus boomers, or people who are working in a certain area of work within your organization. And if you look across the landscape of all of those focus groups and ask the same questions of those folks, you can then get a better sense for what's going on in your organization, where there might be some problem areas, where things are working well, some shared elements of culture that can be lifted up and celebrated and acted out with intention. So ask questions on a regular basis of everyone, not just the loudest people in your organization. 4, be flexible. I'm amazed at the extent to which we as leaders in our organizations and even as HR folks, we sometimes over-police the people in our organizations. And sometimes we can benefit from being a little more flexible. Now, I know some of you are probably automatically saying, we can't afford to be flexible because then we end up, treating people in different ways and there's not consistency across the organization. Of course, you know your organization best. But I will tell you, the organizations that are most successful, the ones that are most impactful, are also the ones that are most flexible. And they allow folks space to be agile, to shift when needed, and they encourage and foster a culture where change is comfortable. So be open to the extent that you can. Encourage openness with your leadership team. Transparency, again, is something that really is demanded of our new workforce and our emerging workforce. Transparency is everything to them, and so being open is an important component of that when you talk about decision making within your organization. Allow people to ask why, and let yourself ask why. Why do we do this? Why don't we do that? Ask questions. Be flexible. Challenge the status quo, and challenge status quo behavior for the benefit of your organization. Make change when change is needed. That doesn't mean you change on a dime, but if your organization is doing something that's not working, ask yourself, why are we doing this? And what would happen if we changed? What would happen if we gave up this policy, that is an albatross around our necks as an organization, right? So ask questions. Why? Ask the question, why not? And recognize and reward agility among staff and among leaders. What does that mean? That means when people demonstrate a willingness to be open and to embrace change, recognize that, celebrate it, and encourage it on an ongoing basis. That's really another great way to drive a talent-focused culture. And then finally, be responsive. It's one thing to conduct an employee satisfaction survey or an employee engagement survey or even to do a cultural needs assessment. But if you collect that information and do nothing with it, you've committed HR sin as far as I'm concerned, right? It's something we just should not do. We should not collect information from people and ask questions of people if we have no intention of doing anything with it. Now, that means as an HR person or as a leader, you may need to check your colleagues on the leadership team. And before they encourage you to go out and find out what employees think, ask the question of them. If we collect this information, are we prepared to do something with it? Are we prepared to take action based on the feedback that we collect? So be sure that you're willing to do that before you ask the questions. We also encourage that you resist complacency, meaning don't give in to, we've got a toxic environment and we're always going to be toxic. Now, if the organization is just toxic through and through, if it has an unhealthy workplace culture through and through, well, resisting complacency might be hard. It may be that you need to move on. But if it's not kind of wholly unhealthy as an organization, then resist the urge to be satisfied or to give in to complacency from a culture perspective. And then finally, it's important to, as you look across the feedback that you've received and you make a decision to respond to that feedback and to take action, it's important to align that action with impact. What do I mean by that? I mean that if staff say that, we really need to be better at offering learning to the staff, then tie that learning initiative or the response that you have to implementing a learning program to the impact that will have on your mission and the people that you serve, right? If we do this, what will be the impact? If we don't do this, what will be the impact? For every action that you propose as an HR leader within your organization, be sure that you can tie that action back to the bottom line. And I don't mean the bottom line necessarily in terms of money, but the bottom line in terms of what impact will this have on staff, on leadership, on our mission, and on the communities that we serve. 5 strategies. If you take these 5 strategies and you implement them on a regular basis, don't make them a one-off. Be sure to repeat them, to continually listen, to ask questions, to act and be responsive. Do that on a regular basis. This is not a one-and-done thing. Culture is not one and done. It's very much, in order to be a talent-focused organization and a talent-focused culture, this needs to be at the forefront of the HR agenda, at the forefront of the talent agenda for your organization. I want to leave some time today for questions. I know we had a lot of questions earlier, and so let's take those now with the time that we have remaining. I think peer-to-peer learning is a great way to share experiences, and so Alicia, fire away with the questions. What do we have?
Okay, so we have, what can you do when you've exhausted every effort to address an organizational or culture impacting issue with every level of staff behind one solution needed, but the CEO continually chooses not to make the change? When you know staff departures, When you know staff departures are inevitable due to this one issue, what are other options?
Wow, that's a really great question, but a tough one. If everyone is on board and the CEO is not on board, you've got a couple of choices. One, to step up to become more vocal as a staff and as a management, to make your positions clear to the CEO that there's a problem. You can do it as a collective kind of communication to the CEO. You can ask for a meeting to convey the concerns of staff. And if that doesn't work, you need to consider whether or not the organization is the right one for you, because others are likely doing the same. There is a point at which kind of fighting the power that is in your organization becomes depleting, right? And so I'm an advocate for self-care. I'm an advocate for positioning yourself in a healthy environment. And if you have tried everything there is to try and leadership remains resistant with making needed cultural change, it may be that you need to make a change. And that's hard to do. No one wants to jump ship. But at the end of the day, we spend a lot of time at work, and it needs to bring us joy. And so if you can't find joy in where you work after multiple unsuccessful efforts at helping to drive a culture change, my advice to you is to find another organization. I know it's tough, but that, to thine own self be true. Alicia?
Okay, another question is, what is the most effective way to engage with top performers?
That's a great question. There are a couple of ways. To engage them individually on a one-on-one basis and to engage with them as a group, right? So high performers have a need or a desire to contribute to their organizations. They bring high levels of initiative. They tend to be self-motivated. They also tend to be comfortable speaking out about what makes them successful. And so engage them. Pick their brains. Create a cohort within your organization of high performers and engage them in regular, systematic conversation about how to get the most out of them. Create opportunities for them for leadership to the extent that you can, whether it's in the community that you serve, with your board, with other staff, with your leadership team, but engage them in meaningful, regular conversation, and then be sure to do something with the feedback that you've collected. I hope that answers that question.
Okay, another question is, can you help define the difference between learning, meaning professional development, and career development?
Professional development and career development, I see those as synonymous, actually. There's not the material difference between the two. It's really a functional language. At the end of the day, professional development and career development is really the intentional focus on facilitating the growth and learning of an employee, right? And so it's providing opportunities for their ongoing career development and their learning. And those two things happen together. They're not separate from one another. You can't grow professionally if you don't have the opportunity to learn, right? Conversely, if you're learning but there's nowhere for you to use that learning, then your professional development gets stymied. So I really see those two things as interchangeable.
Okay, and I think this question refers to your earlier part on talent strategy. In nonprofits, it is sometimes hard to alter total rewards. So are there other options?
Absolutely, there are other options. And what I have seen is in organizations that from a pay position, they're not able to match or even lead the market, but they may lag the market. Where you make up for that lagging is in having a super healthy, super positive, super empowering environment and a culture. And the only way you get that is with intention and deliberation, right? And so you may not be able to pay top dollar from a cash perspective, but I will tell you that if you have a healthy work environment, you will potentially retain staff at higher levels than those organizations that pay really well, but the environment is not healthy. So it's not all about the money. Now, people should not be expected to take a vow of poverty to work in the nonprofit sector, but many are understanding that they may not earn top dollar working for a nonprofit, but they do so with the expectation that they're going to feel a measure of personal fulfillment and professional fulfillment that only can come with intention. It requires leadership to pay attention, to be deliberate in their actions to provide a healthy work environment. And I would argue that if you can't pay top dollar, making sure that your culture is healthy should be an equally high priority, or even higher priority than anything else across the talent management program.
Okay, and another question is, how can culture be cultivated when top-level executives work remotely?
You know what? That's a really good question. I'm glad that question came up. When you have a virtual environment or the leadership is virtual, it really requires much more intention than any kind of level of intention I've already spoken about, right? That means staying present in front of your staff, leveraging technology. Video conferencing, I think, is the best thing since sliced bread. It really allows for there to be personal engagement to the extent that you have personal engagement through video, but it's far better than just email communications. It makes the engagement process come alive when you can look at someone. And so when you have a staff meeting or you have an annual meeting or quarterly, get-togethers among your staff, use video conferencing. There are a whole slew of solutions in the market now that you can use that are affordable. Use video conferencing. Encourage people when they're talking by phone to do so via video rather than just phone calls. Minimize or limit your email communication so that you can create a more personal experience for folks. But remote leaders are increasingly common, and increasingly staff are comfortable with remote leadership, but it does require staying in front of folks in an intentional way. I think we've got time for just a few more questions.
Okay, so another one is, looks like they're seeking clarity on engagement. Can you measure it? Can you ask a certain level of engagement from your staff?
You can absolutely measure engagement. Much like other types of surveys that are out there in the market, there are a whole slew of products out there that you can acquire, surveys that you can acquire to gauge the level of engagement in your staff. So measuring that, I think, is important to know the level of engagement that exists. And you want to do that collectively across the organization, but you also want to collect information that will allow you to gauge where engagement might be dipping, where it may not be as strong, either by area of work, by location or geography, by age, by other demographics that we talked about earlier today. But yes, I encourage you to measure engagement among your staff on a regular basis. Again, once a year is great. If you can't do it once a year, then certainly do it every other year, and pay attention to where engagement may have lagged, and ask questions related to what is driving employee engagement. What are some of the barriers to your individual engagement? And really drill down, right, so you can understand where there may be some common themes that can be addressed more broadly by human resources.
Okay, and one more question. I love the idea of focus groups. What advice do you have for ensuring that those spaces feel safe and that people can truly share their authentic feedback?
Great question. The way to keep focus groups safe is to keep them relatively small, and then to commit to maintaining confidentiality, meaning the data and the feedback that you collect through those feedback sessions, through those focus meetings, should be aggregated. And you should never include quotes or feedback from staff that can be identifying. What you want to do is keep the group small, and then the feedback that you collect, you want to kind of extract the salient themes, the recurring themes, without sharing with management any identifying information. Because to do so will compromise the integrity of the process, and it will call into question for the staff the safety of sharing that feedback. If they know they can be outed, they're going to be less apt to share their feedback with you. So keep your group small and aggregate the data such that individuals can't be identified.
Okay, so that is all the time we have today for Q&A, but we will try to answer some of the other questions as we are able. But thank you all for attending today's webinar. We certainly hope you found it to be valuable. Thank you again to Cornerstone for sponsoring this webinar and to Lisa for leading today's discussion. If you'd like more information about available services or support from Nonprofit HR, please email info@nonprofithr.com or visit us on the web at www.nonprofithr.com. Finally, please be sure to complete the feedback survey that will pop up once the webcast has ended. So we thank you so much for attending, and we hope you have a wonderful day.